Hi, everyone. My name is Karen Zeigler, and I'm the lead human at the Human Score. And today I'm honored to be joined by Russ Munz from Community Financials. Community Financials is one of our nominees for the Global Human Centered Organization Award. This award recognizes organizations that put people at the heart of how work is designed, decisions are made, and value is created. And the most meaningful part is that the nominations are coming from those who have experienced that impact firsthand. Today isn't about metrics or checklists. It's about hearing the real story behind community financials, the beginnings, the values, and the choices that shape a truly human-centered workplace. Thank you so much, Russ, for being here.
My pleasure, Karen. Thank you.
Yeah, let's dive in. Um, and I wanted to start with the origin story for your organization. How did it begin? What was the problem or the opportunity you were hoping to address when you started Community Financials?
Sure. Well, thanks for asking. So I go way back. I was started off after college and as a I was in the Army, an Army officer, and then I went to work at a real estate firm. And during that time, we grew services that were property management services for condominiums and homeowner associations. And a competitor had stole um, over $2 million worth of funds from different customers. And then in the
Wow.
wake of that, I was, we were talking with them to, because they were looking for a new provider. And it really struck me how much of an impact this would have on communities that have a fixed budget and the boards are volunteers and the homeowners pay good money and they expect that it's being well taken care of. So that had a lasting impact on me. When I left that company, I started this business to provide, financial oversight, reporting, monthly accounting to condos and HOAs around the country that would, prevent this from happening to communities. So that was one of the foundational parts. And then the other part was most communities, when they make a change from one type of management to another, it's usually because of poor service and they lost trust in how the money was being handled. So poor accounting practices. Doesn't necessarily have to be theft, like in the first reason why I got into this, but it's just generally bad accounting. And so
Mhm.
that causes a lot of problems for people and it causes a lot of heartache and it causes a lot of extra work for volunteers. And I said, well, if we could create a service that would provide the transparency and safeguards for funds, but then also reduce the time it takes for people to be volunteer board members and make the accounting part easy and stress free for them and provide great service, then we would have something that would solve a lot of people's problems. And so that's where we got started back in 2018. And now we're working with 30,000 homeowners all around the United States.
Wow. Well, I didn't know your story before this interview started, but knowing that you were a nominee, I'm not surprised to see that one of the main reasons for your starting community financials is empathy. You had an you were empathetic towards the needs of the individuals that had gotten, the embezzlement victims that they were, as well as just in providing service. And empathy, I would say, is one of the foundational um, attributes of a human-centered organization. And quite frankly, as a design thinking enthusiast, it's also the foundation of any successful innovation, finding the way, empathizing with the user to meet their needs. So I just love that came through loud and clear in your story. So let's continue on. So every organization obviously reflects the philosophy of its leaders, and I heard your experience in the Army, but perhaps that was part of it. But what has shaped your leadership philosophy, and especially your commitment to being human-centered?
So I graduated from university and was commissioned as a lieutenant in the Army. And so I spent 5 years working my way up to become captain in the Army. And during that time, you have various roles and you're working managing people, you're working, with senior managers that work with you, and then you've got I'm a subordinate to leaders that are influencing me on how I was going to develop, and also shared their philosophies on leadership. So it's really a leadership and management training ground, and it was what I call my real world MBA, and
Yeah.
it was amazing. And I say this in hindsight, you learn just as much from poor leaders as you do from exceptional leaders. And so it was a crash course in, picking up all of those different leadership qualities and philosophies that I use today. And I can go into more detail on some of those if you'd like.
Yeah, I definitely would love to hear more about perhaps some personal experience that you experienced, whether it's good or bad leadership that really has stuck with you over the years, and as well as, if there's a motto. I know every armed service has a motto, but how does that translate into the leadership piece of things? I don't know. So elaborate on that if you would.
Sure. Well, you know, um, one of the one of I'll just kind of go off in different tangents, and you can tell me
Yes, please.
where to stop. But you have people that are, that want to do a good job, and they need the resources to do the good job, and they need training to do their job effectively. And in the military, you've got standard operating procedures. There's a book on how to do everything, so you don't have to
Mhm.
reinvent the wheel, but you got to train on it, and you got to do real world training. You got to do rehearsals and practice. And so there's a lot of the, you know, give making sure that your troops are trained, making sure they have everything they need to do their jobs well. That is also maintenance, that's also procurement, that's, lots of different things. So really, the first step is give people the right tools and make sure they're trained on how to use them. And if you're running an organization that's growing, that you have standard operating procedures so that everybody's doing things the same way, whether you're in one unit or another unit. So that's the first piece. The other piece that I just did at our annual strategy summit with my senior leaders for our company this year is something called Commander's Intent, which is where the leader shares the vision of where they're going over the next 12 months, then over the next, 2, 3, 5 years, what the goals are, and kind of
Mhm.
paint the picture so that in the military, that helps with alignment as it does in business. It also provides perspective so that when the leader is not present, in the military, maybe the leader gets injured, right? Then the rest of the team knows what the objectives are and where they have to go, and
Mhm.
what they have to do, what the mission is. And so that's similar in business. And I think painting a picture for the team, to the managers, to know where they need to go, so that they're aware of it, and then they can make decisions on their day to day without having to make it up, or contact me for that insight. So we're all kind of share that alignment. We're all rowing the boat in the same direction, so to speak. So that's really helpful.
Yeah, I love what you said about clarity, and I'm a big clarity fan myself. I think clear communications is the only way things get done in an effective manner. One time I was writing about clarity on LinkedIn, and someone wrote, and perhaps this is a quote from someone, but it stuck with me because I hadn't heard it before, and that was clarity is kindness. Um, and I think that ties back into the empathy part of things, that we have to be empathetic enough to know that they understand clearly what's expected of them, because to not lay that out clearly, that creates frustration, that creates disconnection in your organization. stopped workflows because people don't understand what to do. So I love that. Um,
Um,
tell me
I'll get,
in this,
I got one more I'll share. Uh,
okay.
and that is, there's different types, there are different types of leaders in the military. And one of them that's a poor leader is somebody who is only thinking about themselves, right? The
Mm,
person who uh, is, will not take care of their troops, will kind of do things to their peers to try and get them in a better position of favor or whatnot for promotion.
mhm,
And versus somebody who's referred to in the military as a soldier's soldier who will look out for the troops first and do those things to provide training and resources and worry about that, and then the team as a collective does better than the individual. So that's one of
mm,
the things too, and I carry that with working with my team also. Care about the staff, care about their benefits, their comp, and that they get quarterly performance reviews and spend time on things that other companies would not spend the time on. But I think it's immeasurably valuable to the
yeah.
overall performance of an organization.
I love that soldier of soldiers title you use there. It's really being a leader of the people, right?
Mm-hmm.
When you
Exactly.
think about those commanders or whatever their title was that were really all about themselves, um, can you, from the outside looking in, spot challenges or problems that managerial style has resulted for them?
Well, yeah. So I'm going to say in business, the translation of that is people don't leave a job, they leave their direct supervisor. So if the supervisor is not looking out for the subordinates, that's when you'll have high staff turnover because they're going to leave. And so that's one example.
Yeah.
Another, just going back to being, having that mentality of a soldier is the training is that the leaders eat last. So I would be at the end of the line with my sergeant for getting food to make sure that the soldiers have enough food to eat, for example, and
Mm.
because they're the ones that are doing a lot of the heavy lifting. So that's just kind of it's purposeful because they need the energy, but it's also demonstrating that you put yourself behind the soldiers.
Mm. Yeah, and in today that point about energy, um, I think it's really prevalent in today's workforce. People are the well-being, the mental health crisis that, so many write about. It is because that energy is really being drained from the employees in different ways. And I certainly don't hear enough about that. It's not what you said. I haven't heard it enough. I don't think that employees don't leave jobs, they leave their superiors, right? That's should be an eye opener for everyone. So next
The
question,
I
which
would a
yeah.
corollary to that is especially in a service business, the biggest line item that you have for expenses is
Mm-hmm.
your salary of your staff.
Mm-hmm.
So that is when I was confronted with, we've got a customer who is aggravating, belittling, uses poor language, doesn't follow best practices that we're saying so we can kind of keep them out of, doing things the wrong way. That's
Mm-hmm.
when the staff will say to me, you know, could we let them go? And a lot of times at other places of work, they would not let the customer go. And this
Mm-hmm.
would be something that would wear down the staff. And the staff would become demoralized because they have to go to work and they have this feeling in their gut of, oh my gosh, I've got to work with this customer. And I see them email me or the call comes in and I don't want to pick it up, I've got like a physical reaction to seeing it come through. And so
Yeah.
at the end of, at the middle of every year, I tell my staff, like, if you have some customers that we can't work it out, where maybe we can try to educate them on how we do business or best practices and why we're doing things. Maybe it's a personality conflict where we could try a different client manager to work with that customer so we can save the relationship. But if that doesn't work and we've tried those things, then we'll have to let the customer go, because it's harder for me to find an excellent person and invest all of this training, quarterly performance reviews, and other things that we do, the person that has the character that we want, than to find another customer. So that's also putting people before profits.
Yeah. Russ, I love that. And I was just reading a post the other day about the customer is always right philosophy and how it can be detrimental. I think the example you've given is much more explicit in the impact than even what I was reading. When you have those customers, Russ, is there ever a conversation with them about, especially the treating other people poorly and their language and perhaps some of the things that they need to be called into check for in this trying to see if the relationship's going to be one you want to keep?
Absolutely. So again, we're we're an organization where I tell people to be as open and candid and direct as possible with each other, with staff, and also with customers, and also
Yeah.
when supervisors are doing the performance reviews, so that it's a tool for people to learn and grow. It's not just a pat on the back. So we provide that in the, this is, not working, this is the reason why, and here is, steps we can take, but we also need you to, are you able to do these changes, or is this something where we try a different person on our team as a next step also? So yes,
Yeah.
we're letting the customer know, because we want to salvage that. It's expensive to market and to find and to sell and onboard a customer, right? So
Hmm.
we want to keep them as long as possible, and we've got long-term relationships with our customers. But there's times when this happens.
Now, when you have to reallocate a customer to, say, another service manager, how do you keep the dignity intact of the person that is, in some essence, losing the customer because of the relationship?
I'd say that, it is both sides want to try and work something out, or give
Hmm.
something want some change to happen. So it's
Yeah.
giving an option for change in the direction that we can say, okay, let's try it out and see if there's a personality conflict, and maybe that
Yeah.
would be something that will help what's going on right now. And so I
Yeah.
think both are amenable to that as a starting point. um,
Mm.
Again, with when I was running a property management company, the property manager would oftentimes, they may have a personality clash with the board member, and that would be a way that we would lose the customer. So rather than
Mm.
losing the customer over that, it's trying to salvage the relationship by trying a different personality type that might be a match. And
Yeah.
it's a, people doing business with people. So sometimes you got
Hmm.
to try different things. But then again, if it
Yeah.
doesn't work, so you give you try and see that it works out, and you give an opportunity for it to work out.
Yeah. And I think I've read somewhere that 25% of the people you meet, based on personality alone, you may not get get along with and be able to engage with effectively. So it's certainly not a personal issue, especially if they're going through the SOP and taking care of the customer's needs. Um, Personality can play a role for sure. So you've already named a few of these, but just in case anything sticks out
Oh,
beyond what you've already. Yeah.
one thing does stick out, which is oftentimes, you know, email is tone deaf.
Yeah,
So
can be. Yeah,
a
for sure.
person can be busy and reply back with direct answers, and then the person receiving the email feels that they're being, too direct or maybe
Yeah.
hurt or
Yeah.
not, and that's not the style they want. So we encourage our staff to hop on a video call, do a face to face so you can see the facial expressions because as
Sure.
everybody knows, most communications done through body language. And so the although it's expedient to do some things by email, it's also some place where the humanness of it is not there. So we try and train our staff to you know do these types of communications first, then call, phone call, and then email, and when you need to.
Yeah. I love that, encouraging them to hop onto a video call because, just another aspect of how you put the humans at the center, both employees and customer. And I think they're so intertwined and interrelated. I really think CX is also includes EX because how can the customer experience be improved if the employee experience is in the tank or not sufficient for them to service them, right?
Yeah, and it
One more
also goes
question.
back. It also goes back to a kindergarten or grade school concept, which is show and tell. So when we're
Yeah.
explaining things, it's can be difficult to do by just an email, although you can use
Yeah.
screen checks. But if we can hop on a video call and I can share my screen and go through financial information with you or a computer system to show you what's going on, then that is
Hmm.
much easier. It's much more effective, and it reduces the back and forth, which is
Yeah.
better experience for the customer, and it's also more satisfying for the staff members. They're not doing back and forth emails for 2 or 3 days.
Yeah. And I know personally, I know there's a name for it, but I don't, most people may not even be aware of it. I only became aware of it when my daughter was struggling in third grade, and that is an auditory processing issue. Sometimes people, especially with numbers, I would think, don't process that information fully when it's just coming in through their ears, where if it's on the screen, they can see it and they have the
Yeah.
ability to process it in a
Visual
better way.
visual learning, right? Visual
Yeah.
learning versus other auditory learning. So yeah.
Yeah, for sure. So, gosh, you've given us so many good content. I feel like I should skip this question, but I'm going to ask it because you probably got more goodness in there. When people describe your organization as human-centered, what does that mean to you in a concrete, lived way?
I think if we put a business as a circle, right?
Hmm.
And you put the humans that are working in that business that provide that service in the middle, and then outside of that circle is the customer, and those are
Hmm.
humans. So it's humans serving humans. And within the circle, you've got colleagues serving colleagues because we've got teams of people. And so,
Hmm.
you know, that, keeping human connection, clear communication, uh, open and honest communication, um, clearly defined outcomes that we're hired to do, and like checklists so that the staff and a standard operating procedure so the staff knows what they have to do. That is putting kind of human centric kind of way
Yeah.
of providing a professional service, in my opinion.
Yeah. I love that. I call the leadership math LX equals EX plus CX because every human has the experience, has an experience. The customer has an experience, the employee has an experience, and the leadership experience is really a combination of the two, right? Um, it- your day to day comes out of what the experience of your employees and how that's reflected back to you, as well as the experience of your customers. But in all three cases, LX, CX, EX, they're all humans, right? And all humans have some very basic needs: be seen,
Ex-
to be heard, to feel valued.
Yeah, and to simplify that for my staff, whether they're managers or just frontline staff that are doing things, we have lots of people talk about this, but core values and not having too many core values so you get overwhelmed. But we've got four, and I
Okay.
put these on mouse pads for everybody on the team so they can look at it every day and be reminded.
Yeah.
Deliver a wow experience, which is great customer service. We keep our promises, continual
Mm.
improvement. We listen, we solve problems, we educate. And then
Wow.
in a quarterly all hands meetings, I will take, online reviews or uh, emails where somebody emailed in like somebody did a great job, and I will share those kudos or that praise that fall into different core values kind of
Mm.
buckets, and kind of bring those to life, and kind of should give shout outs to the team members for them living the core values and providing, bringing to life kind of the way that we do business as an organization. So then they
Hmm.
know if I'm not right next to them, how we want things to happen. And then they can kind of,
Mm.
that's sort of goes align with the commander's intent thing I said before, which is what are we, what's our objective? But this brings some extra color on the day to day for people that I think brings the humanness out of a
Yeah.
staff member and helps it translate it to how they would interact with a customer.
Well, if I didn't know that I had not shared the questions with you, I would have guessed that you were reading ahead because my next question was on values. So perhaps you have another examples. Values only become real when they shape behavior. And so, what specific practices, rituals, or decisions make your human centered organization operate in the day to day? So
I
the
think I
mouse
jumped
pad
ahead,
was
Karen.
yeah,
Yeah.
you did. The mouse
So
pad was an excellent example, and I loved how you brought the customer kudos, letters, emails, whatever, to meetings to recognize the staff for living up to the values. So it's not only on the mouse pad, which I have a mouse pad. I may not even recognize what's on it for because I'm so busy in what I'm doing, but bringing it back to them in real life experiences, that's very powerful.
yeah, I'll share also. So we do quarterly performance reviews because I feel a lot of companies will check the box and do it once a year. Some companies don't do any performance reviews. I've talked with people that I've hired that came from a culture where they didn't have performance reviews. So
Yeah.
I think it's one of the best investments you can make, and it's also quarterly helps people kind of self-correct throughout the year to help them achieve their goals. Um, like but one of the parts of the evaluation, we have lots of key performance indicators and metrics that we're tracking to be objective, but there's another part where it's about how are they doing in relation to those four core values, and there's a self-assessment of the person, and then also the supervisor has a place, and then they kind of score that, and so that's
Mm.
also reinforcing it and discussing it on a quarterly basis as well.
Wow, I love that because how many times do you hear of values being written on the wall? And yeah, that's the last you hear or see of them,
Yeah.
unless something goes wrong. But I love that. Tell me about how you create space for your employees to give feedback. You mentioned that example on their reviews that they can give feedback, but what other ways can they see that their voices are being heard and that they are, in fact, maybe even leading some changes in the company?
Sure. So we do a monthly anonymous survey for our staff to rate us on a 1 to 10 and provide some input of things that they would, want to see changed or whatnot. So we collect that. My HR admin tabulates that and throughout the year, and then we just had our strategy session, like I said, for 2026. So we looked at
Hmm.
the top items from staff that got the most mentions and rank ordered them, and then made some changes to that. And we do that consistently year
Hmm.
after year to improve, bring some of that to life, those improvements. So that's one thing as a company. Secondarily, for the tools that we use, software that we use, we encourage the staff to put in service tickets with our software vendors to make sure that items that they see could be done differently, or improvements or bugs or whatnot get done. So that means the tools continue to evolve and get better, and not
Mm,
just through fixes, but also through enhancements that would make their jobs more productive and less frustrating. So those are
yeah.
great things too. And then, I asked our senior leaders in advance, of our survey of our strategy meeting, what three changes would you want? And that's based on also what they're seeing from their teams. And now there's the opportunity when we're meeting quarterly where there's a discussion or one-on-one where there's you could get they provide some input. And then the teams hold daily huddles. Some of them do 3 times a week, but some do daily huddles where they're just talking quickly about what they're working on today, what they're going to complete today, and what they're stuck on, and if they need help to get past the bottleneck. And so
Mm,
that helps from us producing our results, but it also helps the team member, the manager, the supervisor to see what they need to do to help that team member get past that bottleneck and help them
mm.
with something. And
Yeah.
those are some of our methods for feedback.
Yeah, I love that. The one about the bottlenecks is really important. I think the philosophers hit it well when they said the obstacles are the way. So when your leaders are removing obstacles for the employee, that not only shows they care, but it also speeds up the outcomes and the positive performance results, but by the fact that they've left those out. When you think about the impact of, I mean, it sounds like this is a very natural way of leadership for you. Um, and I could tell that you probably wouldn't consider leading any other way. But when you think about the impact of being human centered on your team, what are some of the outcomes or the positive effects that you know are a direct result of how you take care of your people?
Well, there's a couple of things, right?
Okay.
And one is, you know, getting high customer praise, and having we collect customer surveys for net promoter score every other month. And we also have, I think, 60 some odd at this point Google reviews, and I think they're all, except for one, it's all 5-star reviews. So it's pretty remarkable. And same thing
Yeah.
on with Better Business Bureau reviews. So that's, if you're helping people and they go online and leave you a review that other people can see, that's amazing. I think
Yeah.
the next part is you're going to have customers for a longer time. So that's good for business. So that's customer retention. Lifetime value of
Hmm.
a customer is one of the metrics that you want to measure. And then, you know, the you're going to have fewer customers leaving. So that's a good thing because that's a hole in your bucket, so to speak. So you're going to have growth. You're going to have staff stay along longer also, because that's another part of the human element. And I've had people say that they're experiencing things differently in this organization than they have at other organizations, and they want to stay around to be a part of it. So that lack of staff turnover also results in a better customer experience, and then that also reduces costs over time, which helps the company reinvest profits into providing more and better service.
Yeah, I love that. Um, but I don't want to, gloss over the fact that leading human first is not always the easiest path. I think that's perhaps the roadblock that keeps many organizations from leading in that way. So, what challenges have you encountered, and how have you stayed anchored in your values in meeting those challenges?
I just have from all the different leadership experiences I've collected, you know, in my professional life, some of which in the military, others outside of that. I
Yeah.
I just know that there's a, a better way that I would want to be treated as a team member and also as a
Yeah.
customer. And so I use those as guiding principles, um, and try and share that with the team. And there are things, listen, quarterly performance reviews are take a lot of time and energy from the entire organization. But
Hmm.
the outcome is achieving goals and improving along the year versus just improving one time a year at the end of the year for a little bit. Um,
Yeah.
the easy thing would be to, not fire customers and just keep them so that the company can grow its top line revenue, and not have to look for a replacement customer. The easy thing to do would be to not have quarterly kind of all company meetings and talk about the core values and other things. Um, you know, some people think meetings are a waste of time, right? So there are things that I do because as a when I was an employee, or I was dealing with a supervisor in my previous positions, I want to I want to take what I can and provide a great experience of what I would want to have in their shoes, right? And kind of keep that in mind.
Yeah. I love that. And I agree to your point about a lot of people think meetings are a waste of time, but I find in my own experience and what I've observed that when the meetings serve a purpose and they meet needs of the people in the room, um, they're actually quite productive and useful, and people can leave energized about, what they're working on and the job they're doing. Um,
Exactly right. So I have, you've got clarity, there's fewer emails or phone calls because, you're addressing a lot of the questions in those daily huddles or those weekly team meetings. And, I've got people that are, energized after those quarterly meetings, and that probably lasts for a little while, right? Where they kind of
yeah.
feel like it's part, sharing what outcomes we had for the quarter, what our goals, the theme is for the upcoming quarter, sharing the praise, sharing updates that happened. And, people leave, sometimes there's some training, sometimes there's a fun video that's shared, but people leave, overwhelmed. I've had people say, my gosh, that quarterly meeting was so touching. I cried and told my family about it. So it's like,
Oh, wow.
it's really kind of connecting with people during those times, and I think that's vitally important, as well as
Yeah.
sharing information. I think it's vitally important to connect.
Connection, that's key. Yeah, if you think about the meetings that were a waste of time, there probably was no connection in those meetings at all. Not between the people and not between the people and their needs and the needs of the customers they're serving. Connections, a big key. Thank you for sharing that. If you could share one message with leaders around the world about building a human-centered organization, what would it be?
It's worth the investment.
It's worth
um
the
you
investment.
know it's I think you create a stable business, one,
Mm.
because you've got staff that want to stay longer, you've got customers that want to stay longer, and stability or instability is one of the things that really sets business leaders back. Putting out
Yeah.
the fires and being reactive versus spending the time to nurture something that is, strong, or building a strong foundation in something so that as you grow, you've got something that's stable. So that would be the first thing. It's worth it for peace of mind from the leader, for
Hmm.
and looking yourself in the mirror and being able to feel that you're doing something really of value to your customers, and really
Yeah.
taking care of your staff and taking care of people in general.
Now you mentioned stability, and what popped up for me was there's a lot of talk, especially with AI, about risk management. I see them directly correlating to one another. How do you feel that the human-centered approach not only builds stability, but affects it mitigates risks in some way?
Well, I think if you're taking care of people, one, you're mitigating risks against staff turnover, which is expensive. You're also
Mhm.
mitigating risks, and you're talking about character, and you've got transparent systems to measure all these things. You're mitigating risks against, poor employee kind of behavior where they may be, somebody's, you know, sleeping on the clock, so to speak, or whatever it is. But people
Mhm.
who are part of an organization where they feel heard, valued, that they're contributing, they're not going to, I don't think they'll be exhibiting those other types of issues. So there's fewer HR issues to deal with, I believe, too.
Mhm. Wow. Great stuff, Russ. I thank you so much for your
Um,
time today.
one more
Yeah.
thing. So
Okay.
I would say that, everybody's looking for purpose.
Mhm.
And I think if you're providing a business or an organization that provides real value to its customers and values its staff, the staff can feel that they have purposeful work and the customer feels it. And so
Yeah.
then we as leaders all feel good about what we're doing because we're doing something that's purposeful. And, so I think, that's the long term game I want to be in.
Yeah. Yeah. What does Simon Sinek calls it? The infinite game, right? The infinite
Yeah.
game of purpose. Well, thank you so much for sharing that and the example and you are to the community and the world for building a workplace based on the fact that humans remain and will always be at the center of success. So thank you so much for joining me today, Russ.
My pleasure, Karen. Thank you so much for having me.